Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 14th school board meeting. At this time, we were in recess. Do I have a motion to return to open meeting and certify for the closed meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I have make a motion that the board reconvene into open session and certify that the Gloucester County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements provided in subsection A of section 2.2-3711, and that only public business matters that were identified in the motion convening the closed session were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We have a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan, will you poll the board?
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Hensley?
Yes.
Mrs. Hook?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Records?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Burak?
Yes. Thank you. Next item is the moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Farina.
If you'll please join me for the moment of silence. Thank you. And now if you'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Farina. Next item on the agenda is personnel items. Do I have a motion for the approval of the monthly personnel appointments and resignations? A motion, a second? A motion, a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next item is a motion for the approval of the amendment vehicle allowance to the superintendent's contract. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. A motion, a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is student personnel items. Do I have a motion for the approval of 5 requests for religious exemption?
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. And the next item is the additions, changes, and the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Clemens.
Just a couple of things. Under consent agenda, there are 2 items that we'd like to have pulled out for further discussion. One relates to staff time schedules, GBJ, and the other H, 14-15 instructional study trips.
You heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended by Dr. Clemens?
I'm sorry, what was the second item, Dr. Clements, that you mentioned you wanted to pull?
The first item was item F5, which is GBJ staff time schedules, and the second item that will be pulled will be item H, informational 2014, 2015 instructional study trips.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is the approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve? Minus those 2 items that we removed.
So moved.
Motion. Do I have a second?
Second. Second.
A second. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you, Mr. Records. A motion and second. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have one comment. The minutes from the September 16th, 2014 special joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors, Section B has me listed as present and absent. I was absent for that meeting.
Okay. Thank you. We'll make that correction.
No problem.
Any other discussions? Here, seeing none. Ms. Duncan, will you poll the board?
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Hensley?
Yes.
Mrs. Hook?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Records?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Burak?
Yes. Thank you. Moving on to staff presentations and recognition. The first item is recognition of the 2014 VSBA Media Honor Roll nominee submitted by this school board. And we have two nominees this evening that we'd like to present to. And Ms. Kim Robbins of the Gloucester Matthews Gazette-Journal, would you please come forward? Thank you. Each year, we submit names to the Virginia School Board Association for their recognition at the Virginia School Board level, but we also recognize those items that were in here, and I think both of these individuals were recognized at that level too. The Virginia School Board Association recognizes those people within the community and those entities within the community that support the school system in a special way. We have terrific support across our community, which is shown each and every day, and we'll probably hear about some more this evening during the financial reports. But the first one is with Kim Robbins as part of the Gazette-Journal, and what she does for us and reports in such a positive way, letting the community know what we're doing and what the schools are doing within each of the classrooms and throughout the community. So with that, I want to thank you so much for everything you do for us.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you. And the second presentation will be to Reese Williams in representing WXGM Radio, FM 99.1. And likewise, there's not a day that goes by on a morning show that doesn't go by that there's not someone from the school that's on your part of your show in the morning, and allowing that media to that forum to be used in positive ways for all of our school students. There's students, teachers, everybody that's on that radio station in the mornings with you guys, and it helps get that information out to the community in a very positive way as well. So with that, I'd like to thank you as well for everything you do for us. Thank you. The next item is the proclamation for School Bus Safety Week, October 20th through the 24th, and Gloucester County Public School Pupil Transportation Appreciation Day on October 22nd. I think is what we'll do here is to have a motion to make that proclamation official. We have a motion, a second?
Second.
Any discussion, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great. So that makes School Bus Safety Week the week of October the 20th through the 24th, which is next week, and Gloucester County Pupil Transportation Appreciation Day will be on October 22nd. The next item is any updates on boards or commissions from school board members. Any board members have any comments and updates that they would like to provide at this time? Ms. Parker?
First, from the Ed Foundation, we are gearing up for our run in the cold part of the year. I think we're going to do that again in February. But I did want to also bring to the attention of everyone that did not know that Jennifer Worrell was chosen from the Ed Foundation to represent Gloucester County Public Schools. She went on to the state, did very well, and we're very proud of her, and we're glad that she teaches in Gloucester County.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Anybody else? All right, moving on. The next item is citizens' comment period. Speakers are asked to state their name, the district in which they reside, and limit their remarks to 5 minutes. Is there anyone that would like to approach the board?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Clemens, staff, members in the audience. Howard Mowry, Gloucester Point. Good evening, Purple Penguins. How are you tonight? As we enter a new national phase of our governing, attempting to neutralize our cultures and beliefs to be of one only, the need for the citizen to become proactive within their community is a must if the republic is to stand free. An item of critical interest for the children, students, parents, and guardians tonight. The child, when leaving the doorstep each morning until returning each day, is a ward of the state. The student comes under the supervision of the government, including transportation, teaching, nourishment, discipline, and evaluation of mental and physical development. This also includes all extracurricular activities on the student until the student reenters his domicile. Dr. Clemens is to be commended, asking for the citizens to become participants in the development of the comprehensive plan that will set the educational platform for the students and parents or guardians covering the next 6 years. I have been here for 15 years and have no recollection of a public hearing on this subject as required by state law. This plan also provides for tracking with the school board, providing a report to the public by November 1 of each odd-numbered year, providing a synopsis of the plan over the past 2 previous years. Has this ever been accomplished? As we consider the revision of this comp plan, all factors need to be considered to improve upon our product. That is the best education possible for the children, providing them the best employees for their developing years, along with modern technology, and the ability to develop and retain the basic requirements of those subjects that have the most impact on their ability to succeed in today's world and the future they wish to travel into. The next process to consider tonight is the reestablishment of the committee that resets the district lines and a transportation committee to coordinate with each other for the 2015-16 fiscal years. As you are aware, the new Page Middle School will need to have approximately 45 seats left vacant. Peasley can pick up the difference since they will have approximately 173 empty seats or 7 classrooms empty. At the same time, when you review the elementary schools, the lower county needs realignment since Abington and Achilles are close to maximum fill with Body Tot and Petsworth on the decline. This becomes a critical task since politics is always a major factor, even if denied. Finally, yet importantly, is the high school with 494 seats empty, equivalent to 23 classrooms. How are you going to adjust this internal vacancy if it continues? I would think that a wing would be closed and sealed for environmental safety and reopened when the population increases. Many critical options on the table, plus planning for the future, as we struggle with declining revenues and values, along with a large portion of our working class folks fleeing the county along with school-aged children. You have your work cut out for you. The citizens need to take heed and become participants, or not too far into the future, the governing may well be the citizens' only source of direction. I would surely hope not. I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Mowry. Is there anyone else that would like to approach the board? Mr. McGovern?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Clemens, members of the school board, Brian McGovern, Abington District, and GEA President. Want to address, again, and some of you had received an email from me regarding file number GBJ. I think I understand it a lot better because this morning it looked like there were no changes, and some of the wording had been expunged and replaced from the first reading, and I think that was good that that occurred. The second, well, I guess it's actually the third full paragraph, addresses elementary school teachers, and the added wording states administrative meetings, curriculum development, pupil supervision, assigned duties, parent conferences, group or individual planning, and extracurricular activities may require hours beyond the stated minimum. I think many of us who are teachers understand that that very well, because I don't know of any of us who doesn't spend lots of hours beyond the minimum. But my question is, that paragraph relates to elementary school teachers, and is that wording strengthened and just applied to elementary school teachers? And I also asked the question, does the board or administration see a desired limit to that? There was a recent survey done by the GEA representative at Bethel Elementary School, and the findings of that were shared with me as well as with Dr. Clemens. It was very interesting. One of the things in there was that 38%, and I don't have them in front of me, and I will certainly share the results with anybody around this table who wants to see them. 38% of teachers there need to work or need to get second income to be able to survive. That means 2 out of 5 have some type of job outside of their full-time job in the school. I don't know if that's after school. I don't know if that's weekends. I don't know if that's summers, what it might be. But they need to supplement their income. But I think it was over 80%, I believe it was, work an average of 53 hours per week just at their teaching job. And that number seems to be ever increasing. In my own example, yesterday was a teacher work day. I was in my classroom working on schoolwork until 6:33 p.m. and then took work home with me. So, and I am absolutely in need of extra sources of income to be able to survive. So we're kind of dealing with this double crunch in that the work that we do requires more and more hours, above 40 hours a week, yet Gloucester teachers being $10,000 below the national average of teacher salaries and prices rising, except for maybe gasoline, we need to continually seek additional sources of income. And, you know, for many people, I think there is eventually going to be a breaking point where they need to, you know, look at other careers altogether. I hate to see that happen because we have hundreds of very dedicated and hardworking teachers in this school division. I thank the board and Dr. Clemens and the administrative staff for hearing my comments.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Is there anyone else who would like to approach the board? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. The next item is Student and Advisory Committee items. Do you have anything, Ms. Farina?
Yes, sir, I do. Mostly, I'm just going to speak from personal experience, but I'm also talking about what I've noticed from other students at the high school and their opinions that they've shared with me. And it seems to me like many teachers aren't living up to the standards expected of them. And I'm not trying to say that every teacher at the high school is terrible or that it's the fault of any administrators or anything like that, because the high school and all our schools have plenty of amazing teachers. Mr. McGovern, right over there, he's a great teacher. But I have noticed that the one thing I hear students complain about the most doesn't have to do with the parking lot or the dress code or even with school lunches. It has to do with teachers. And these complaints are coming from students who work hard every day, but they're still struggling because they aren't being taught as well as they should be. And so many of these students are saying that because of inadequate teaching in some of their classes, not all of their classes, they feel like they're not prepared for things such as tests, SOLs, and classes that they may decide to take later on. And of course, I'm not trying to tell anyone how to do their job because obviously I'm not a teacher. Obviously, I don't know the amount of effort that it takes to be one. But I have been in school long enough to know the difference between a teacher who just does, you know, the bare minimum, they just do what it takes to get by, versus a teacher who wholeheartedly cares about their students and really wants to see them succeed. Like Mr. McGovern said, one who stays after many hours that they aren't required to stay. And I think most students would agree that the latter is what we need more of in our schools. I also know that lately a lot of focus has been put on technology and supplies and making sure that our schools are up to date with all the latest, you know, technological things that we need. But we can have all the laptops, smart boards, e-readers, whatever that we want, but without great teachers to lay the foundation, I mean, our schools will never be 100% successful like we want them to be. And so, personally, I think some ways to fix this, it would be helpful if teachers were frequently evaluated by students, administration, even other teachers, sort of like peer evaluation. And And I also think it would be good if, like, particularly administrative evaluations were done without the knowledge of the teachers, if possible, because I know, well, okay, I've known way too many teachers who have, quickly changed their lesson plans just to impress whatever administrator has come into the room for observation, and I don't think that's fair. Of course, it's not every teacher, but also, I think if the budget and time will allow for it, it would be great to see regular staff development meetings, like for all teachers, even those who may not necessarily need it, because, we have teachers here who have been working for 20 to 30 years, and it's just nice to have a refresher from time to time. Everyone, needs that refresher. And so these are just some of the thoughts that students have shared with me and some thoughts that I have as well. Of course, like I said, we have plenty of amazing teachers here. I'm not trying to put anyone down, but it would be greatly appreciated if you all and members of the board would take this into consideration. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Freiner, for your comments and your candidness. We appreciate it very much, and we'll take your words to heart. Next item is superintendent items. Dr. Clemens, you have the next 4 bullet items.
Yes. Again, good evening to everyone, and we'll get right to the items under the superintendent. The first one is the September 30th average daily membership, and you had a copy of that earlier, and we tried to do a comparison so that you could see the number of students by grade level at each building in 13-14 as opposed to those that are in 14-15. And overall, we have a difference at this point in time was of September 30th from last year. Actually, it's not 101 because that number on the state report actually wasn't 5518, it was 5508. So it means that there was a difference of 91. And you can see, again, as the document shows, as it relates to that average daily membership, 6 of the 8 buildings that we have a little bit of a declining enrollment. Of course, a high school with grade 12 being, because last year was a much bigger class of seniors as it relates to this year, so you'll see some enrollment numbers there. But the thing that I wanted to really talk about as it relates to this is relates to funding and relates to the projected budget that we have. And of course, our budget that we are utilizing at this point in time was based on a projection of 5,430 students. Well, even when you take a look at that number, and then you have to back some numbers out too that may deal with students who are in special programs and things of that nature, and taking a look historically, Ms. Wright shared some data with me as it relates to a historical perspective about what the March 31st ADM looks like as it relates to the September 30th ADM. We're projecting that there probably will be about an 80 student, 85 student shortfall that we'll have to deal with. And as a result, of course, we need to make sure that we have appropriate revenue that we have to deal with resulting from a revenue loss of projected student enrollment. And so at this point in time, we feel that, with certain things that we have that might relate to reserves and compensation and benefits and things of that nature, and we'll know more about that, as time goes on, but, we feel that we'll be able to make up, for the loss of revenue based on the state projections and based on what our actual numbers are. But I wanted to make sure that the board knew about that, and as we prepare, we need to make sure that we're very fiscally responsible in terms of what we're looking at. So when, that happens, that we are able to make sure that, financially we are able to do what needs to be done. One other number that I want to make you aware of also, because you see at one of the slides for Abingdon, 14-15, you see that number at being 98. Actually, that number is a little bit down because we had one student that is actually no longer here. And then we had 2 students that are actually in more of a self-contained setting, so that number is actually 95. So as it relates to the K-3 class size reduction initiative, then we're within our guidelines as it relates to class size reduction. So, and of course, we've had discussions and previously about, some classes have larger numbers than others, and that's absolutely a fact. But I think, we have to also take a look at it in totality as it relates to the overall student enrollment and making sure that, from a financial perspective as well, we're able to take care of all of the things that we need to, and we will be looking at a decrease in enrollment from what we had for the previous year, so we just have to prepare for that.
Mrs. Hook?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Clemens, if you could, you indicated we're projected to be down 80 or 85 students in our March numbers, and the calculation is so complicated. Do you know approximately what that translates into in dollar figures?
Yeah.
What is it?
Just under 400,000.
Just under 400,000, okay. Thank you.
So I just wanted to make sure that, like I said, the board was aware. And again, as Ms. Wright and I have had dialogue, we feel that we'll end up being okay. But at the same token, we just have to be always, looking at everything that we do to make sure that from a financial standpoint, we are doing what we need to do.
Anybody else? Ms. Hensley?
Again, I just want to reiterate, I guess, my position. I still believe that some of our class sizes are too large. When we look at grade 1 at Abingdon, it has gone down to 95 now, but we still have classes in the first grade with 24 students in them for a first grade class. Grade 2 has 24 students. The average is 23.5. Grade 3, the average is 24 kids in a class. And I think asking so much of our teachers is just not appropriate. I understand the financial constraints, but I also understand that if we need to reallocate from something else, I support getting more teachers or doing something to alleviate these classes that I would call bubbles, whether we redistrict next year or not, as has been suggested, all of the schools or something like that. I think that's too many children for one teacher to have to do in a class in those lower grades. And I still have concerns about the 5th grade at Body Taught. There are 23 kids in a class, and I think specifically there are classes where there are a number of children that have IEPs. And again, I think our teachers are awesome, but to be able to reach all of the children at the level that they are and all that's required of them, I think we're asking them to do the impossible. And I'm concerned that they will burn out, that they won't want to continue teaching, and I just don't think it's fair to the students. I don't think it gives them, I don't think it presents the students first mantra that we follow, and I want to reiterate that. I still would like to see some suggestions from Dr. Clemens or Ms. Wright on some way we could alleviate these problems.
Well, I guess the other thing that I would say to that, there are two things. I think part of that deals with what we talk about in comprehensive planning, because I think when you take a look at a short-term and a long-range plan, that, can be a part of discussion items that are talked about as to what we want to do with numbers. We have certain things that we have written in terms of what we'd like to have as a policy, but the financial realities of certain things, then you have to always take into consideration. The other piece of that is, some of these numbers don't take into the account, things like your specials and your resources and things of that nature. So even though you might have a class that you might see that's 20 or 21 to 1 or 24 to 1, that doesn't necessarily mean that's that way every single day because of pullouts and different things of that nature. So, but I mean, your point is very well taken in terms of looking at numbers, but I think we have to balance that with financial realities of also dealing with declining student enrollment and thinking about, what we ultimately end up asking for. Because like I said, if your financial projections hold accurate, then we do have to account for a loss of student enrollment at the same time. So on one hand, it's nice to ask for more teachers to maybe alleviate a class that has 24 to 1 to get down to 18 to 1, but at the same time, we're losing students. So we have to, look at that and make sure that we are, doing ultimately what's best to serve students, but being fiscally responsible as well.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I agree that this is something that will be looked at in the comprehensive plan, and I'm glad for that. But I still contend that we could do something in the short term. This is the only chance these first graders will have to be in first grade. The idea that we might be able to fix this next year or the year after that doesn't help the students who are in these classes every day right now. I know we have specialists, I know that they help certain students, but they don't help all students. They don't go in and take half the class from the teachers. And I just don't think it's appropriate.
Anyone else? Mr. Records?
The 85 students that you mentioned that we potentially may see a reduction in here over the course of September 30th and March 15th, is that based off of what we've averaged over the last 2 years or 3 years or however many years, the last 4 years, we've averaged a reduction of 85 students? That's how we came up.
I used the percentage over the last 4 years.
The percentage, okay.
So I think what Ms. Wright is saying, that right now we're at minus 91, and we anticipate that we'll probably gain 6 more students between now and March 30th, which will leave us with a deficit of 85 students with respect to our budget in the ADM at the March 30th date. Am I correct? And you based on that reduction on the last 4 years?
As of right now, we're 13 students lower than what our budget was built off of. Is that correct?
One of the things that has to happen is the March number that you received in your agenda, or that came out by the email today. That's a total student count for K-12. And all of those special needs students who are in regional programs, we get a different type of reimbursement for that, and it is a higher reimbursement. So it's a good thing that they do not count. And so right now, we have 43 students currently on September 30th that come out because of the type of student that they are. Either they're a special needs student, or they're a student from another division, or they're served, in some other type of program outside of the division. So that's half of it. And then generally from the fall to March, we lose students. One of the things that happens is the ones that graduate in December are only here for a portion of the year. And so we have the completers who come back September through December, and then they graduate, and so their count goes away from January through March. And so that creates another reduction. And then some of it is just the general moving in and out. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Wright. Dr. Clemens?
The next item, since we talked about the comprehensive plan, is for us to just have a follow-up. We have our next comprehensive plan meeting for information Wednesday, October the 22nd. We initially thought about having it at the high school, but then when we went over and we took a look at the cafeteria here, we feel that that'll be a good place because we can really stretch out into different groups and really get into some work sessions about, what needs to happen to drive the, the school division forward. And we had a chance to discuss that also in our division leadership team meeting. So we're expecting a good crowd to come out that will be consistent, hopefully, of dealing with administrators, teachers, students. The young lady's comments tonight were very well thought out and put together. And I think that's a piece that you always think about when you're thinking about comprehensive planning, because, the students are the main reason. And we have to take a look at that and value and listen to what's being said on that end also. So hopefully we'll get a good turnout so we can really start putting some things together to have a direction that we all hopefully can be proud of as we move forward. And we'll send out some other advertisements. We'll do the all call coming up, and we'll get some further information out. So hopefully we'll have a great turnout. And for those who came to the last meeting, I want to say thank you, and hopefully we'll see you again next week as well as we continue this process.
Dr. Clemens, with respect to that, the last meeting, were all areas represented that we were interested in?
We had about 25 to 30 people there, and there were a couple of areas that we did not see that I'm going to follow up with this week. We talked about members of the Board of Supervisors, law enforcement, different things of that nature, so I'm going to reach out to them as well to try to get, those entities there with us.
Great.
Third piece of information, and I know that Mr. Hutchinson will talk a little bit about that in his report, as well as just as a follow-up and informational to the security grant. Gloucester County Public Schools was awarded a security grant from the Virginia Department of Education in a little over an amount of $98,000, and that will go towards continuing our upgrades for security, at our buildings. And we've talked about some uses of that, and we want to try to make sure minimally that we have, basic levels of security at all of our buildings. Some of you have discussed with me in the past about, the elementary schools and different things of that nature. So we're trying to make sure that we disperse, the service in a way so that all of our buildings can be accommodated for. So we're excited about that, and hopefully we'll continue that process of having the upgrades for, our buildings. And like I said, Mr. Hutchinson will talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of what some of that will entail once we get into part of his administrative report also. And then the last thing that I had, I did have an opportunity last week to attend the WHRO meeting. And I thought that was real informative. I've been a part of that for a number of years, but one of the things that they talked about was coming to Gloucester. They give us an annual impact statement, and they want to come out and give a report to the community on the annual impact. So we'll be scheduling that. They also have a series called Education Now, and I know that Dr. Kaiser had been on that series before he left the county, and they've asked to do that now that you have a new superintendent. And so I'll be at some point in time doing a spot for Education Now on, hopefully an innovative program or something that we have here that can represent Gloucester County Public Schools very well. There are a couple of new things that I thought that are going to be real beneficial also, because we had a presentation from a representative from the Virginia Department of Education who runs the virtual programs department there. And in the next couple of weeks, there's going to be something that's coming out that's called Learn 24. And I think Learn 24 is going to be very good because it will locate all of the free resources for public schools that are searchable, to include online courses. We have 20 current providers for Virtual Virginia. And when it talks about professional development and the courses, it's going to be one spot where you can go in as a huge search engine, and you basically can find anything that you're looking for. And I think that's going to be really, really good. Something else that's probably the latest online that people haven't looked at is called EduWidgets. And that's something that we'll be, looking at. But one of the neat things that I saw about EduWidgets is that for students, they have the ability to author their own content. And I thought that was really unique when it starts talking about creating, when we're thinking about the higher levels of blooms for creating and evaluating, authoring your own content. You can create your own timeline, graphs, etc. Some of the graphing tools, speaking of mathematics, has things like the scatter plot, t-test, all of those types of things. So some of the information that's there is going to be really, really good and beneficial for students. So I'm really excited about, those resources. And of course, we have eMedia Virginia, which a lot of people are familiar with, and it's just a reminder to make sure that that information is constantly put at the forefront for teachers to know that they have many resources to use. And WHRO is a valuable commodity that we have, and we just want to, constantly put that out there. There are new things that are coming up. Skills Online is something else that's going to be coming to the forefront that deals with workplace readiness skills. And I thought about that even from expanding to a community model, because it talks about dealing with those who may be unemployed or underemployed or currently employed, but who still want to expand on career readiness skills. And some of those modules and things that they have will start leading to actual industry certifications. So as we look to take a look at all of those things, I think that there may be some possibilities, especially for some of our staff, support staff, and looking at getting certain certifications and things of that nature. I think it'll be really good. We'll be learning more about that and pricing and things of that nature, but I see it being an opportunity for us to provide, some real benefit to members of our support staff as well. So just stay tuned for further information.
Thank you, Dr. Clemens. Next item on the agenda is instructional items. Dr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board, Dr. Clemens, the folks that are here and at home. The instructional reports from all the schools and from our departments are, I believe, included in your packet, and lots of information there like last month that I won't read verbatim, but I do want to share a few highlights with you if I could for just a moment or two. The high school is hosting a STEM Career Day, Gloucester High School STEM Career Day, and that is Saturday, October 25th from 10 to 2, and there are going to be employers in STEM fields that are there working with teachers and students and to help provide information. The public is encouraged to attend, and that would be students, parents, community organizations, and businesses. So please do come out and support the Gloucester High School STEM Career Day on Saturday, October 25th. Also in October, it is National Bullying Awareness Month and also Disability History and Awareness Month, and several of our instructional reports reference some very specific activities there, but I'll try to shape that in some general terms. Elementary and middle schools regarding bullying awareness work to address bullying through school-wide initiatives, including lessons, curricula, and PBIS initiatives that we have at our elementary and middle schools. And one in particular example that I'll share with you, at Achilles Elementary School, they're having a Unity Day, which is next Wednesday, October 22nd. And so they get their students and their teachers to wear orange to make it end. So that's Unity Day at Achilles. Should be an orange day down there next Wednesday. And also at the high school, one of the high school initiatives is that all of their Health 9 classes have counselors present lessons to the class and information on bullying, and then the second half of that initiative is the sheriff's office visits those classrooms and discusses some pretty emerging but serious issues, cyberbullying, and then of course the sexting issues that we see in some cases more and more. Related to Disability History and Awareness Month, we do appreciate the efforts of all of our special education teachers and our regular education teachers for helping to keep this awareness alive and at the forefront in their schools. And in particular, we have some very unique book displays at Gloucester High School, another one at Achilles Elementary School that I saw this morning. So if you're visiting Achilles, right inside the front door in the main hallway where parents kiss and go is a wonderful display with some terrific print resources that Achilles has related to a number of different disabilities. Third on my list to share is some information that we'll have coming to you at the October 23rd work session, some more specific information. We'll be providing the assessment report for 2013-14, so Ms. Carmine will join me for that. And I'd also like to provide some specific information to you regarding an update to the year-round school startup grant proposal that we had submitted back in the summer. So I'll have some details to share with you in just a little over a week's time. And then last but not least, on Tuesday, November 4th, which is Election Day, it's also Gloucester County Public Schools Annual Diversity Day, and able to share some more specific information now. We have a keynote presenter that's going to join us to have all of our teachers at Gloucester High School, and we'll have a keynote presentation from Dr. Brenda Williams. She is a retired professor emeritus from the College of William & Mary who specializes in inclusive educational settings, special education, and culturally and linguistically diverse populations. And so she's going to do a keynote presentation, and then she is also training some faculty facilitators for small group breakout sessions that will occur after the keynote. And then that'll provide some small group discussion, and then those individuals will then go back to their schools in the afternoon, and hopefully we'll continue that conversation at the school level later that day. And the idea then is to incorporate some specific goals and objectives related to diversity awareness in each of the effective school plans that our schools develop. And so again, that's Tuesday, November 4th. While I'm talking about that publicly, it's not necessarily a public event because it's an internal event for our teachers, but nonetheless, board members, please, you're encouraged to attend, and we'll get some more information out to all of our staff members by the end of the week, and we'll have additional resources posted on our website to support that event as well. And I am happy to field a question if you have one.
Board members, any
Pass to the
questions
top.
for Dr. Wagner? Yes, Mrs. Hook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I was going through the reports, I jotted down some questions, but I forgot to jot down what groups they came from, but I think they're all from yours, and judging from my list here. The first one, I was reading in the special education section that we have something called Indicator 14, where we're tracking our special education students for a year after graduation to see essentially what they're doing a year after graduation. And I did not know we did that, and I'm very interested in that and wondering if I could get, or if the board, we could get copies of that just to see how well we're serving this group and what they're doing. But that, I think that was mentioned again in your report, and if we could, as a board, get a copy of that, I'd be very interested in taking a look at that. Also, you mentioned that the CAT version of the 6th grade math SOL that's going to be given this year. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that. Is that the actual SOL that's going to be given to the 6th grade this year, or is it going to be a pre-test, a practice test for them? What's going to happen with that?
Well, hold on, everybody. Here we go. The Virginia Department of Education is really coming on board with the CAT test, a computer adaptive test, and it was piloted last year at several grade levels and several school divisions, and the VDOE and Pearson feel comfortable enough now that the computer adaptive test is ready for statewide full-scale rollout in 6th grade math. So that is this spring. They're actually administering the computer adaptive 6th grade math test this fall for schools that are on a different schedule, but that doesn't apply to our schools in Gloucester County and, quite frankly, to the majority of middle schools around the state. But we're going to give some more information about this next Thursday, but suffice it to be said that the computer adaptive test is one that provides all students some baseline questions, and then depending on how students respond to those questions, it routes them to different questions, either questions that require lesser skill or questions that require more skill. And one of the algorithms that the state has been working through is how do you equate those tests in such a way that you can give, in other words, if 10,000 students statewide potentially take a different test, how do you equate those in such a way that they have a parallel or an equitable score? And so they believe that they can do that, and so we are part of that initiative, and it's not a pilot, and it's not an opt-out. That's what we're doing. So we are looking forward to learning like everybody else. But
It's going to be at our next work session.
We'll talk a little bit more about computer adaptive testing at the next work session. And when I said a moment ago, hold on tight, is fully expect us to be moving this direction with all of our SOL testing in years to come. Fully expect it. And there are a lot of benefits to it, but there's a lot of training that goes with it as well. So we'll update you next week if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for the questions.
And the last thing I had was we're still waiting to see what we're going to be required to do for our alternative assessments for those SOLs that were eliminated this year. Where's the state on that? Where are we on that?
Well, I think we're in a pretty good place. It's a good question. We can give you, I was prepared to give you an update at the November work session or board meeting. We are pretty confident in most of our content areas right now. We're very confident in all of our content areas, and Ms. Hook's referring to the SOL tests that have been eliminated this year with the new legislation. And schools are required to adhere to the local guidelines for alternative assessments that the VDOE has passed, the State Board of Education has passed those. We are all set in science, we're all set in writing, and we are working right now through our history alternative assessments. And the next area that we also need to be concerned about, and we had a conversation about this today, are the alternative assessments designed for students with disabilities that traditionally don't take the SOL tests. And so we're still in the process of getting some clarification from the state on whether or not those alternative tests are already alternative enough, or do we need to have an alternative to the alternative test? And there's some clarifying guidance that's coming out from VDOE right now. As a matter of fact, there's a training that's occurring at the end of the month that our division director of testing will be attending. But if you'll permit us to provide an update to you in November, we can do so with great specificity.
Thank you, Dr.
You bet.
Thank you. Is there any other board members that have any questions for Dr. Wagner? Dr. Clemens.
One thing, Dr. Wagner, you might want to mention what we had talked about as it related to the field trip. Yeah.
Thanks very much. As you may have picked up on, we pulled the field trip or the study trip list out of the consent agenda, and to place it here, annually we present to you a list of study trips that our school leaders and teachers feel that they can reasonably project will occur this year, and you approve those, and we're grateful that you do so. But there's a request for a trip that I thought I would share with you and try to get some guidance, and if we need to discuss this more at a later time, I understand. But we have a request from one of our middle school teachers to initiate a study trip or an international field trip to Costa Rica, and this trip would occur in the summer, so the summer of 2015. And the school board does have a policy that addresses not only the regular field trips, but international trips or just, I guess, for clarity, international trips. And the policy suggests that the school board does not endorse international trips that are private trips. Those are trips that are, like educational foundations, or a group will come in and sponsor a trip. And they typically need a teacher to join along and some other adults. But nonetheless, the school board policy, which is a VSBA policy, says that the school board does not endorse the trip or support the trip, and understands that those trips can occur. So in other words, it's not necessarily a school-sponsored trip like a field trip down to VIMS would be. But nonetheless, there is another statement in that policy that says that employees are not permitted to solicit students for the trip. And it seems to be contradictory, because inasmuch as we've had international trips or study trips before, I think it's a fair presumption to make that teachers or sponsors would typically solicit interest from students. And I share that example because there's actually a local example that has the same conflicting message. There's a school division local to Gloucester that has essentially the same school board policy that the school board neither endorses nor supports. It's an international trip is not a school-sponsored trip. And it has the same language that says employees may not solicit students. However, on the school division's website is an advertisement for this trip. And it says all students, parents, and family members are welcome to apply. And so I'm interested then in some general feedback on whether or not you are interested in pursuing a more specific policy related to international trips, maybe some guidance that we can provide there. But I also need to follow up with this teacher who is very interested and ready to try to get the the wheels turning on an international trip if it's something that the school board might endorse, or excuse me, that the school board might recognize. Not endorse, because it wouldn't be a school trip. So let me stop there and see what your thoughts are.
Any comments, board members? Ms. Hensley?
I fully support it. I know, Dr. Wagner, you and I have talked before about in language classes or other opportunities, and I think traveling abroad is one of the best experiences that students can have. And I think especially it gives the opportunity, coming from a small county, which is still a relatively rural county, to allow students to go somewhere completely different and see another way of life. It's a great opportunity. I fully support it. If we need to address a policy issue, I'm fine with doing that. My only concern, and how I read the solicitation policy before that part, is that I have been aware of trips where if teachers get so many students to sign up, then they get a free trip. And I thought that's what that was addressing, not the saying, hey, who wants to go on this trip with me, but the teacher who's trying to get students so they can go themselves or get a discount in that. So that's how I have understood that in other circumstances, but we may need to clarify that. But go to Costa Rica. I think it'd be amazing.
Thank you, Ms. Hensley. Any other, I think Mrs. Hook, did you have something?
Go ahead. I guess my question is, you weren't here, of course, but I know of a lot of students that went to France years ago and to Spain and some other countries. So how was that addressed then? Do we know?
And I believe that it was advertised in schools. And there are some school divisions that have explicit policies against the advertising in school. For example, Alexandria City has a policy that says no posters on the wall, no announcements over the PA system, no use of instructional time to talk about a school trip. Ms. Hensley raises a good point, although I don't believe that everyone would make that distinction. I think it's a worthwhile distinction. But by and large, if a teacher approaches a company, and there are lots of companies out there, and says, hey, do you have any trips to Costa Rica? The company would say, well, if you get 15 people, then you can go for free. And so inherently built into that process is this idea of solicitation, that the teacher needs only 15 students to go for free. The question would be, what if 300 people want to go and are able to write a check? Is that something then that this one teacher is going to be able to assume responsibility for, especially if it's been advertised in schools? And so the companies also provide posters to be hung on walls in schools, and I understand that, and with trip details and evening information sessions and things of that nature. But once you put a private company's poster on the wall in the school, potentially it's a tacit endorsement of that business. And then you may have other companies that say, we'd like to get in there too and sell some trips. So I just think we may need to address this in the future. But in the immediate term, we have a teacher at one of our schools that would like to invite middle school students, all 6th and 7th graders, to be fair, would like to invite all 6th and 7th graders to demonstrate their interest in this trip and their level of commitment, and have an information night for families and that sort of thing. But my question is, how do we get people to that information session without advertising in a school or the teacher talking about it, unless our board members say, go ahead, talk about it in your school?
Any other comments?
I just have a
Mrs. Hook?
few, and as a general principle, I absolutely agree with Ms. Hensley. If you can go abroad, go abroad. It's an amazing experience, and certainly educational experience. My first comment, however, is that if we have a policy, we need to abide by the policy. Now, if we want to talk about changing the policy, let's put it on a work session or whatever and change the policy. But until such time, we need to abide by the policy. And I would also say that if we are going to do that with regard to international trips, I think we need to make sure we do it deliberately and slowly and not in a hasty fashion just to get this trip out there. International travel can be dangerous. And the world is a an interesting place right now, and who knows what it will look like next summer. I certainly have no idea. So I'm not opposed to evaluating that policy, but I definitely don't want to do it in a very rushed fashion, just to try to get it done quickly so that, and we don't even know anything about this trip right now other than the destination, what they're going to do, where they're going to go, et cetera. So those would be my comments.
Well, and there's a question about if it's not a school-sponsored trip, or if the trip does not need board support, do you need to know? Could it be, does it have to be related to SOLs in the summer, or can they go and have it be a purely cultural trip and visit, beaches and look at sand? It all depends on the extent of the board's interest in being involved in that approval. It's an overnight trip, obviously, but it is during the summer, which ostensibly there's little jurisdiction there, and so anyway, that's where I leave it.
All right, I think Ms. Parker and then Dr. Clemens.
My thought is that whatever we have to do to give the go-ahead at this point, whether that's what you just said, it's a summer trip, we don't have any input in it at this point. I would also like to see us bring back a policy. I think we also need to consider encompassing, that kind of worried me when you said 300 kids could possibly sign up for a trip. You've got to have sufficient people there to be with those children. Personally, I would like to go myself. I think it's a great opportunity for our students. I'm assuming that it would also entail parents being fully involved. We've handled other trips to California and other things. Granted, this is international, but I would say whatever we have to do to make this be able to be feasible for these students, I'm supporting it.
All right, Dr. Clemens?
Well, I think the whole premise of bringing it was, just like we talked about with cell phones, what's practice and what's policy may be two different things. And so in terms of trying to align, I think that everyone will agree with having an international trip is a wonderful experience. Sometimes that might be the only experience that someone may have to travel abroad. But how we align that to make sure that it meets, the regulations as prescribed by the board, and making sure that the board is on the same page in terms of doing that, because like you said, there are a lot of details, there are a lot of other things that have to be considered, and we have to explore all of those little nuances before just a blanket approval would happen in terms of just saying yay. So we will come back to you with some further discussion as it relates to policy, and Dr. Wagner and I will have some further dialogue about all of those entities, so we can provide the best recommendation to the board for consideration.
I think Mr. Smith had a question.
One question. So are we just waiting for a recommendation?
Yes.
From Dr. Clemens? Okay, because I would have some concerns with liabilities. We're talking 6th and 7th graders, and if every parent wants to go with their 6th or 7th grader, that's fine. But I would not want that responsibility as a teacher, or even as a chaperone, of going with 6th and 7th graders on this trip. I wouldn't, just liability-wise, I can't support that.
But that's a choice, and just the other side of that, that's a choice that the teachers and the families make. And there may be some families that allow their children to go and with people they don't know, and I think that's the point of the information sessions, and the groups typically get to know one another. There may be a temporary solution here, and that may be the use of non-instructional time. If we were to suggest that a teacher would put a table up in a lunchroom, let's say, and allow any student to pick up information, and the teacher worked the table, and students could pick up information about that to come to an information session somewhere off campus during non-instructional hours to learn more about a trip, that may be a temporary solution, as opposed to a teacher using instructional time to advertise a private trip. But to address your question, Mr. Smith, and then I'll stop talking, is many of us have concerns about it, but if it's not your trip, if it's not a school board sponsored trip, then the concerns are someone else's concerns.
So,
So if it's not a school-sponsored trip, then our policy doesn't matter, right? Because it's not our trip.
Right.
Okay.
But I think at this particular time, we're looking at the policy just because of this situation for future reference, if not for this one. And Dr. Clements and Dr. Wagner is going to bring that to this board at a future meeting to discuss with a recommendation.
Yeah, and the main thing, as Dr. Wagner said, it was about solicitation. You know, once the solicitation piece comes in, it based on what school board policy is, then it does become a school board matter, because the school board has to decide if you want solicitation to happen. So that's why we have to, you know, look at it from that standpoint, and then, you know, give you, you know, the best guidance. Yeah, I think Dr. Wagner's, you know, recommendation probably would be the most viable at this time, because it's just like other entities that may want to come in for different things like open houses and being a part of things. You know, we usually will have a process in which you cannot be a part of that, but there can be information that's on a table that people can pick up at their own discretion, but that's still dealing with the school entity. This is a, you know, and that recommendation would be outside of the school. So we just have to, you know, keep that in mind.
Okay?
I just have one quick thought, Mr. Chair. What happens if could we lean on community ed and Christy Lewis's group to help spread the word and break down the solicitation barriers?
that's one possible solution, but then how do you select or direct the audience?
Yeah, good point.
See, the goal, and the teacher and I had a nice phone conversation about this the other day, and there are lots of variables that come into play, way too many to talk about tonight. We all agree that it's a good idea, but the extent to which the school board or the school division endorses, sponsors, or otherwise supports the trip is really in question. So what if you have a 6th and 7th grader that has a younger brother in 5th grade that's a rising 6th grader and wants to go, or a 7th grader that's not even going to be at the school next year that's going to be in 8th grade? You know, so all of these variables come into play. Is the teacher the one that's responsible for sorting and selecting students? In other words, if you know, there are lots of issues that need to be. And typically, they're not talked about, and so they're not considered. You know, they're not even in our conscience because we don't need to think about them. But once you start thinking, there are a lot of things to consider.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner and Dr. Clements. We look forward to your recommendation in the future. Yes.
I just want to clear, so Dr. Wagner can inform the teacher that during non-instructional time, there can be a table or something so that students can pick up information about a trip to Costa Rica until we have a policy. Is that what the position is? Because Dr. Wagner needs to go back to the teacher and say, you can do this during non-instructional time, or no, you can't do anything. And so I support the compromise position at this point until we get a policy of during non-instructional time, cafeteria, wherever, you know, as you were saying, there's a table so that any student who would like the information can, at their discretion, take the information and then talk to their parents about it, because it's going to be a parental decision as to whether or not a child goes on any trip, field trip, school trip, private trip. And so I would like Dr. Wagner to be able to do that so the teacher can move forward. Summer's a long time off, but this type of thing takes a significant amount of planning. And I would like that to be able to go forward.
Thank you, Ms. Hensley. And I apologize, Dr. Wagner, I didn't get that from you as a proposal to do that. If that's what we want to do, and Ms. Hensley, is that what you're looking for from an action from us?
Well, I want to be able to tell the teacher either go or no go.
Okay.
Because as Ms. Henley says, it takes some planning, but I don't want her to put herself out there and all of a sudden it becomes a school trip.
Sure. Ms. Hensley, do you want to make a motion on that, and then we'll vote on it as a board?
I move that the teacher be allowed to use non-instructional time to offer information on a trip to Costa Rica.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second? A second by Ms. Parker. Any other discussion by board members?
Yeah.
I do. I guess non-instructional time, that means, for example, during lunch, correct? Or just when walking. I don't feel comfortable with them doing it during school time at all right now, whether it's instructional or non-instructional. Now, if, I have no idea when a teacher would do it otherwise, if she might have to call students, during he or she would have to call students during off hours, I don't know. But given what little we know about this issue and what our policy states right now, I'm uncomfortable saying during school time at all. I appreciate your position, and I appreciate the joys of international travel, but I'm not sure if we want to get the school that involved with it at this point.
Okay, and I think Mr. Anderson had another comment.
No, because Ms. Hook politely summarized my comment.
All right. All right, is there any other comments from board members? I'm going to ask Ms. Duncan to poll the board on this one.
Mr. Smith?
No?
Ms. Hook?
No.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Bureau? Mr. Bureau? You've caught me off guard.
Yes.
All right. Motion is defeated.
Okay. It's defeated so at this particular time, so I think, Dr. Wagner, at this point in time, we'll probably look to you and Dr. Clemens to come back with some recommendation on policy, I guess, initially, before we move forward.
May I ask a clarifying question? Not to belabor this point, was the motion that was defeated the one for using the non-instructional time during lunch, or even after school?
During the school day.
Okay.
During non-instructional time during the school day.
Okay, so the motion for during the school hours has been defeated.
Mm-hmm.
But after school is a possibility. Do we need board approval for after school?
I think you need to make another motion
I think so too.
for,
You don't have any control though, do you?
Right, once a teacher's no longer on our time,
But it's going to be done at our school.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Mrs. Hook. I didn't hear you.
As a clarification,
I heard Dr. Wagner, I just didn't.
so once a teacher's not on our time, they're not on our time anymore.
but the only question then would be not on our time and not on school property, or, I'm just, just throwing that out, because it could be not on time, but still be on property. So are we talking about not on time, not on property, or are we talking about not on time and on property? And I'm sorry to just, throw that little piece in there, but that's just what it is.
And if I could offer for my teacher friend who is probably listening and watching, please don't be discouraged. We support your interest and your initiative.
Absolutely.
Now, I totally support the initiative as well, and I think we ought to read our policy and be better prepared to have a conversation about this at our next meeting.
Yeah.
in the interest of time, can we expedite some recommendation for our work session on the 23rd, so we could address that, so there is sufficient time to support efforts going forward for next summer? Because if we don't do it soon, even though it's not till next summer, it's not that far off.
Mr. Chairman, may I say something? Two things. One is common practice in that we do allow things that are of interest to students for summertime activities that might prove educational to be displayed as pamphlets or literature left at a common table in schools. We've done that with equestrian activities, local marine educational programs and that type of thing. So that's an option for you to consider. And part two is that if you look at policy IICA, I believe it is, it'll give you something to review prior to the next meeting.
One last call. What's the pleasure of the board? I mean, I think we've already went through a motion that we defeated with respect to the school day. Do we want to have another motion that allows them to solicit after hours, but still on property? Or do we want to just hold off till the work session and look at that recommendation?
I would prefer to hold off during the work session, but, certainly if there's a common table with non-school related activities that get put on that, I would think we could treat this just like we treat everything else.
I wouldn't. All right.
There's so many what-ifs.
It would be my recommendation, if the board agrees, in the interest of time, to allow Dr. Wagner and Dr. Clemens to come back on the 23rd at our work session. And in the meantime, if this is just one additional pamphlet on a table of other pamphlets, it is what it is. Yes.
If you could look back and find out how other students, I know they've gone to France. I know my niece went to France. I know there's been some trips to Spain, I believe. Peru. If you could find out how those were handled, maybe that would give us a little more insight into what we should do as far as policy goes.
Yeah. And one comment on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that'll be very interesting because we don't know how they were handled. So they could have been handled on school property, and soliciting. And I'm not saying that so if they were, then that just means that this is a very timely discussion so that we can make sure that whatever goes forth from this point, it's, all minds are clear and everybody's in agreement.
As Dr. Wagner indicated, and as Mr. Records indicated, I think we're all in favor of supporting this. But like Mrs. Hook indicated, we have a policy. If we haven't followed it in the past, shame on us. But going forward, we're aware of it. We need to follow it. And if we don't agree with it, we need to work to change it to allow what our new thoughts are and our new path is. And that's what we'll look for both of you to come back to us on the 23rd so we could do just that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none. Next item is human resource items, monthly department report. Dr. Smith.
Good evening. I bring you greetings from the Office of Human Resources to the chairperson, vice chair, members of the school board, Dr. Clemens, and other affiliates sitting at the table, viewing audience, and those who are behind me. Human Resources is continuously trying to improve and provide the most excellent customer service to not only the staff members that are here in Gloucester, but those that are interested in coming to Gloucester and working for us. For a few things I'd like to highlight, and I won't be long because the report is online. I encourage those of you to please, if you're out there in TV land, go to our website and read the report regarding human resources and all the reports that we present. I would like to highlight something that you as board members may not see or know about, but you provide the financial support for our teachers to secure advanced degrees. We have a number of teachers that have reached that plateau as far as master's degrees. They have obtained master's degrees in 13-14 and 14-15, and we have 3 individual teachers who have received PhDs. So I commend them, and I also thank you for the financial support. We're also still on that one-stop shop. Remember my theme? We're still there. We are creating sites on our website to make it easier for individuals to apply for jobs, be it support, professional, or guest teachers. We have trained 38 guest teachers this year, that's degreed and non-degreed, and we are moving forward to create a more advanced site for support staff. Ms. Hugate and myself, we're in the process of going around to all of the schools and talking about the licensure certification website. We will have a site similar to the licensure website for our support staff. I've had the opportunity to go around to most of the schools, I have one more left, to talk about the HR Administrator's Handbook. It's very important that our administrators, and we do have some new ones, understand the process and procedures that we require in human resources that will keep us legal and on top of things. We are in the process of doing the same thing for our support staff managers. Mrs. Hugate is handling the professional side of it, and Ms. Cara Tyler is handling the support staff, and I'm with both of them, so I'm going all around as well to make sure that information is being communicated appropriately. Hats off and a hand clap to Dan Holloway, who helps us continuously to present our IPAL report to the Department of Education. So I thank you very much for all of your support financially, and I also thank you for your support of our efforts in human resources. We are going green. Our staff is currently developing their SMART goals for the 14-15 school year, and boy, are they adventuresome. So thank you very much, and do you have any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Any questions from the board? See none? Thank you very much. Next is administrative items. Mr. Hutchinson, and before you start, I have one quick question for you. I think you're going to address item F5 and item H from the consent agenda that we pulled. Is that correct? Yes. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
The time policy and the
H.
Field trips, correct?
Okay, we already addressed the field trips. All right, so you're just doing, you're going to address F5, policy GBJ, staff time schedules, as part of your report.
Would you like me to begin there or like me to end there?
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, and you have the microphone.
Okay. Yes, sir. I have several items, and some of them I'll ask for your nod regarding them. First thing I'd like to do is just give you a quick overview of a couple of things. We, after quite a period of time, have secured a bid for the sign for T.C. Walker, and it's a sign package. Actually, it was designed by Acorn Signs out of Richmond, and it took almost 7 months to get the design completed. After it was completed, we because of initial estimate of cost, we did release it for bid. Bill Lindsay put out the bid, and I have displayed some of these for you to see. And this would be the sign that goes right now where it says T.C. Walker Elementary School. Many people have asked why have we not taken the T.C. Walker down, the sign, T.C. Walker Elementary School sign down, and it's just really a logistics thing in that if we had removed the sign, we would have had to reapply to erect a sign where we can change the face of it without that going on and going through that long period of bureaucracy. This will be a smaller sign to replace a wooden sign that exists over near the entrance to facilities in the new ground structure, which is being constructed or has been constructed, now being wired. By the way, the grounds folks are looking forward to having an open house and a cookout for the support staff. So you will be invited to that. If you like hot dogs and hamburgers, great. If you're a vegetarian, probably some good potato salad or something. So anyway, this will be a sign. And with this sign, we're hoping to create a trend as signs wear out that we will replace them with signs that will represent our school system with a logo and a label, so some uniformity as we move into the future, even perhaps many years from now. This sign will be placed on the front of the building. That's outside the Budget and Finance office. The one to the left is Joanne's, and the one to the right is Heather's. But it'll be on that wall. It's in this gray tone aluminum, which provides some longevity and lasts for quite a while. This will be a sign that'll be placed right out here in this courtyard area. So when you walk in to that area, the arrows will point to doors. And the doors, if you probably already noticed, are all lettered. And of course, for example, the names and the lettering go together there. We're going to improve some signs, and these are really low-budget signs that are just to point to the buzzer for entry. We're going to rearrange some of the welcome lettering on the door to make it more inviting for people to see in and see out. In the office main entry and the HR space behind the reception desk will be this sign placed so that when you walk in, again, it follows the motif. By the way, the leaf, the tree branch represents locusts, those are locust leaves, what they represent there. A locust is a pinnate formation of multiple leaflets. One leaf is that parallel leaflet formation. In which we'll also take this logo and place it on a wing wall in the auditorium, and on the other wing wall we'll place the GCPS logo underneath, say, the camera over there. So anyway, this package runs about $94 $9,400, and that includes installation. And again, it's a high-quality, long-lasting sign that we won't have to worry about going back. These signs we will not have to worry about peeling and going back and repainting, that kind of thing. And it will probably pay for this with our reserve funds that we've set aside for the end of the year. Any questions? I just want to let you see what you've asked about. Many people have been, like Mr. Records asked me today. So,
Mr. Records?
Yeah, I did. What is on that particular slide, what is 1W3 and up to, what does that mean?
If you're outside the building, you know the courtyard, every door has a sign on it, has a number on it. And what that means is 1 West. I'm sorry, I can't read.
So there's a 1W on that particular
Yeah, there's a round logo that says 1W. In fact, if you look at all our schools, they all have those labels. They're put on by our local CERT team.
Okay.
And they're probably about a foot across, and they have a number. And what they are, they're numbered by the direction that you face. In other words, if you're looking toward the west, the signs are labeled W. Look toward the east, 70, and north, south, so forth. Mm-hmm. And then they're numbered right to left. Left to right, I'm sorry. And again, it was initially established, again, 2006 or 7 by the CERT team, just so that if we call emergency response, that's where they show up. Okay.
One question, I apologize if you already said it. The 3 North School Board, is that just the main entrance?
Yes, sir.
Is main entrance or reception more appropriate than school board?
Except that when your early discussions with the building, looking to the future where it may be a multi-use building, so you wanted to indicate that the school board office, I guess we could add office underneath it or something like that, or.
I'm just not tracking what it's referring to, because we don't have offices.
When you walk to the front of this building, this sign will be sitting in this courtyard out where those tables are in that area. So you'd see a sign that would point toward the.
But I think his question is the school board's not here.
Oh,
Right.
I got you.
There's no difference between school board and administrative,
Okay.
really, right?
What Dr. Wagner said. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
it's
a
often,
tomato
this
thing. It just strikes
usually
me as-
referred to as the school board offices. Whether or not you as a board occupies the space, it's your administrative area. The school system's administrative area. I mean, if you have a deference or a preference, we could certainly adjust it. These haven't been made yet. In fact, the bottom sign doesn't have anything on it. It's TBO, means TBD, to be determined. That will not be there.
I personally would like to just see it as the main, nothing on there tells me where to go if I'm just looking for the main entrance. So I would rather see main entrance than school board or reception.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, we can certainly do that.
One other item, and you flipped through the slides pretty quick, and can you go back to the one slide that's going to be on the exterior wall, that one right there?
Yes, sir.
That, to me, and this is minor, so whether y'all want to consider this or not, really, at the end of the day, I don't think it'll hurt my feelings, but that sign, the other sign, go to the reception sign, the sign you're putting up in the reception room. That looks way better and would look, I think, just as good on the outside of the building. It almost looks like spaceship-y or something on the front of it with all those concentric circles, if you go back to that other one. But
There, that's that one. I don't even see why we would even need that one. Why would we need that one? I don't see why that would be a need for that. You got all the other signage all over the place, and then you're gonna have this big round one, and the other one, like Mr. Records was saying, they so nicely designed, and then you have the spaceship.
I think the thought was that we placed something on the building itself indicating that that's what it was. I mean, otherwise you'd not have the only sign you have would be the one out on the road, but you would not have one on the building.
Enough of them.
I work for you, sir. What's the board's preference here?
The money from the signs and hire some teachers.
Any other comments?
One.
Fine, I'll take
I like Mr. Records' recommendation that the logo from behind the reception area be used on the outside of the school as well.
Yeah. What's on the inside. But I would also tend to agree with what Kevin just mentioned. You know, do we really need to have a second one out there? I mean, that's a bronze sign. That's probably several $1,000s, I would think.
It is. I'm going to tell you exactly what it is. Exterior wall logo is $1,900.
Mr. Records, what was your recommendation with respect
If
to
we're
this? I
going to do a
couldn't hear you.
sign outside, the sign outside look like that sign right
Yeah.
there versus the concentric circle one that was shown. That was what I originally mentioned, which I think
And that would be
Mr. Anderson
$588.
agreed. $588.
The significance is that the oversized logo has to be milled differently than just that single logo, which is smaller. I mean,
That's $588. The concentric circles you currently have proposed for the outside is $1,900.
yes, sir.
Ms.
If
Parker.
we remove the outside, don't do the one on the outside, is that going to bring the cost down?
$1,900.
$1,900, yes, ma'am. $1,900 less, yes, sir.
If we remove that sign that you recommended.
Remove that sign that
I'm-
was recommended.
Yes, sir.
$1,900 less.
I'd like to make a motion that we just remove the sign that's on the exterior wall of the building, that $1,900 sign.
Would you just make a motion for the whole package as to what, I mean, as far as the outside signage, that's what you want to do?
I make a motion to approve this sign package with the exception of the sign that is located or proposed to be located on the exterior building wall, which should reduce this total package by $1,900.
Second.
And change.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Yes, Ms. Hensley.
Mr. Hutchinson, what can these reserve funds be used for? What can the reserved funds be used for? This funding's coming out of a reserve, and I don't know if there are any stipulations.
What happens with reserve funds is, as when we establish a budget each year, we ask each budget holder to hold in reserve 10 to 15% and 10%. So that money's held as we see the year progress to see where we are. And I mean, each budget is based on a proposal or from each department as to what they need and what they want to do. But to be safe and to not wear orange suits, we have each department hold back 10%. And then as the end of the year, Joanne begins to balance her budget, continues to balance her budget, but projects the end of the year, she releases funds as appropriate. She always has a balanced budget. I don't want that misread.
So if we did no signs, that $9,400 could go to help alleviating overcrowded in some of our classes. Is that correct? Right. But for the short term, it could be applied.
That all goes back to the conversation we always have and the Board of Supervisors has to about spending non-recurring money on a recurring item. So to hire a teacher, that's a cost that's going to keep occurring every year if you want that teacher to stay employed versus a one-time fee like would be associated with the sign. So certainly you could hire them, but you'd have no guarantee that their employment would last past the end of the year. And I think if you broke it down, $9,400 would hire a third of a teacher.
Which would be a third more than we have.
Right.
Well, we do also need signage out here. I mean, it says T.C. Walker Elementary School, and it's said that for however many years. So I think we do need a sign.
One, the other piece also, when you think about that, and it brings back to the initial conversation also, when you think about reserve, again, we have to also think about the ADM and loss of enrollment. So you have multiple entities that are in that we have to consider.
All right. Is there any other comments? Ms. Hensley?
Yes, I disagree. I'm adamant on this. If we really want students first, then signs can wait and other things can wait because we're not spending this money on what I think is a more critical need.
Any other comments from board members? There's a motion and a second on the floor. All right. No, seeing none. Ms. Duncan, will you poll the board? And just to remind everyone, it's the sign package as shown minus the one on the outside of the building as indicated by Mr. Records, who made the motion.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Hensley?
No.
Mrs. Hook?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Records?
Yes.
Mr. Burek?
Yes. Okay, Mr. Hutchinson, you're still on.
Thank you very much. A quick review of a few things. I'm going to, a little bit of facilities report, or excuse me, our administrative services report. I just want to let you know that technology has replaced about 200 computers. And if you look in their report, you'll notice the number of packages of software that they've been implementing. We have a tremendous, broad-scoped, specialized amount of software packages that address specific grade levels and specific activities and specific curricula needs. Also, they implemented the e-backpack program, which has placed iPods in the hands of math and science teachers and almost all teachers at the high school. So moving forward, technology has been a tremendous venture this summer, let me just say, and this year. Transportation, you heard, thank you for recognizing them. As you know, they are a special group of people. They not only transport our folks safely, but they set the attitude and the mood for children for the day. And likewise, they have a relationship with parents that they meet at each bus stop, so they're quite a great investment. And for your information, if you're interested in seeing your driving skills, you can join them in the bus rodeo on Saturday, the 18th of October, and see what they have. It's really a fun time. They usually have good food and just a lot of laughter as they kid around with each other in their driving skills and driving tests. The health and safety are something that's been a real focus along with construction. But I would like to commend the nurses for the beginning of the year. I would like to thank you as a board for your appropriation of money to buy an eye scanner that was done last year. I got a chance to spend some time with Bethel and see its product firsthand. It is quite a detailed instrument. Produces detailed analysis of the eyes that can be turned over to a doctor. It's not just a guess. It's so very specific and as Ms. Sophie said, it'll be interesting to see how this used by the physicians and how much response they have to the tests that are done. It's certainly a time saver, and that's a big plus. But of course, you're aware that they are keeping an eye out for viruses, and of course, our custodians are stepping up their cleaning policies and taking care of things like that to just stay ahead of the game as much as possible in that regard. Security has been a number one focus of all our staff here lately as the security grant was approved. We've gone into looking into the cost of the security grant. The superintendent has told you that he wants to have all schools at a minimum of equality, and or at least the same thing, and that's something I think as a board you've asked us to do and provide security at all our schools. So with the grant, we're looking to place all schools have a panic alarm system which will allow certain places within the school, and I won't reveal those types of places, to be able to trigger a lockdown and shut down of doors, immediately notify the sheriff's department of any activity that requires that kind of response. The doors, again, will have swipe card systems. The grant itself covers Petsworth, which we've already provided the infrastructure to, Botetourt, and Abington. And of course, you know, the high school in Achilles already had the system. The matching grant for the panic alarm, the matching funds for the panic alarm works out to, and some already spent money works out to about $123,000, which is the grant plus the matching requirement. We are asking and planning to add the other two schools, which will be Peasley and Bethel, for a price of about $80,000. And what we're going to do is ask you to consider in our proposal to the Board of Supervisors asking for that money to be a part of the rollover money from the end of the year savings that we had from our budget. Our end of the year savings is about $226,000, and so we're asking that to be a portion of it. So, and what would end up with the product would be that all schools would have the panic button system, all schools would have the swipe card entry systems, all schools would have an A-phone entry into them. So all our schools will be in equal status along that. Future grants, we could look to adding cameras and those types of things. There are a couple other points that go along with that, and I'll talk to you about that, but I want to see if you have any security questions first.
Dr. Clemens, did you
Just might want to mention the portion about the bathrooms and how that plays into what we're looking at.
Part of our needs right now is that even if we were to begin this project immediately, we have in our capital appropriations some bathroom repair, and we thought we might redirect that at this time to go ahead and move forward with the security systems, just in case. And obviously the $226,000 that we're asking for rollover is not money in hand, but we do have some bathroom money that we could set aside, that we could redirect from our capital needs to completing the security systems in all schools. So that's an option.
Mr. Hutchinson, just one quick question. I remember when we were talking about this early on, especially it's at Peasley, there was a modification that was going to be added there to provide line of sight from the office to the outside, because that's the one school that doesn't have line of sight. Was that something that's still part of this effort as well? All the other schools have line of sight, or you come in through
we have a
vestibule?
camera and a monitor there to monitor the front entrance. Okay. In fact, all our schools, if you know, when you walk in, you'll notice there's a big monitor, where that same monitor is viewed by the office and others. So, and again, I won't reveal all the camera sites either.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hutchinson, is it in the plan to have cameras installed over behind the field house as well? Because that is an area, that parking lot behind the field house, as well as that whole area needs to be monitored.
That is absolutely a need, and as we look forward to the years of applying for the grant in the future, that along with adding cameras to our schools, continue to upgrade and add cameras would be part of future grant applications. But what our intent this year is to have everybody on the same page with door security and panic buttons.
That would be a very expensive process. Field house and have it in the school. And that's very expensive, because you're running from, you're outside, you're not connected to the building per se. So that is very expensive.
There are wireless options, but they also are expensive. Yes, sir.
Wireless options are even expensive.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. Mr. Records, I think you had a question as well.
There was security grant that we received was around $100,000, right?
98.6.
something.
98.6. Yes,
okay. And then we had $226,000 in rollover, I think is what you mentioned, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's a total of $332,000 that we would like to spend, or almost $226,000 to do this security work. So is that correct? Do I have those numbers correct? $332,000?
That would be correct if we directed it all towards security. We have a couple other needs we'd like to consider for the rollover Monday request. And if I may go on with that, or?
Well, how much is the security of the 332?
Of the 232, we'd be asking for, if we would go that route, and it would be about $80,000, $83,000, $83,500.
So it's $180,000 worth of security total when you include the grant money as well.
The grant money has a match of $24,600 that we have to provide. We've already provided about $3,000 that we can apply to that. So we will have about 119 or 18 in that range. So it'll be 119, round off, 120 plus 83. So you have about 203,000. Aha. Real numbers, no abouts. Yes, ma'am.
For the total security project, if we do, including Peasley and Bethel, we're looking about $203,000. And of that amount, $98,714 is grant. Then we have about $24,000 that we need to use for match. We've already spent $4, a little over $4. So, we would, if we want to move forward with the whole project, the whole scope of this project now, we would need to redirect our current capital money for the bathrooms towards this. But we had mentioned during the joint meeting on the report that we gave on the capital projects, we listed that on there at that time, that the bathroom money was being held until we could determine how much equipment grant we received, and that we would need to use some of that money to make the match on the equipment grant. And so as it stands right now, we need to use right around $20,000 of the bathroom money, which was $108,000 in your current capital budget approved by the county. So we'd have to use a portion of that towards just meeting the match for the security grant and the 3 schools, Patchworth, Body Tot, and Abington. And then if we want to, we will request the balance from last year, but, that would have to be appropriated before we could expend that. So the Board of Supervisors would have to appropriate that. So if we want to move forward now with all 5 schools, we would have to go ahead and defer your current capital money to this, from bathrooms to this project.
And I think that the one thing that we'd have to consider if we do that, right now the grant, so we're still able to apply, and I think one of the thoughts was that we could continue to apply. Hopefully we would continue to get the grants and then use the other monies for those things that we see as a need as well. So that's why we didn't take that money and say, well, we'll take all of what was originally thought about in capital and just do the whole security at one whack. But as I shared with Mr. Hutchinson when I first came in and looking at the buildings, the one thing that I wanted to make sure that we had was that initial baseline at every building, because we knew that, we didn't have that. So it's just, that really comes down to the pleasure of the board. We could redirect and request and do it all in one whack, or we could continue the process that we have over the last couple of years. And of course, grant monies are never promised to you year after year, but we have been successful in getting that over the last couple of years. So
the grant money has to be expended by March the 25th, because from the date of the award, you have 6 months to spend it. So we need to get those orders committed and move forward on those funds.
All right, board members, would the intent is, if we do get reappropriated the money that's left over, to backfill the bathroom efforts?
Do you want to address that, John, or would you like for me?
Let's tag team. That's why you get the exact numbers, and I can. What we're proposing is, with the addition of the preschool initiatives or preschool programs at Botetourt and at Bethel, we do not have playgrounds appropriate for those children. As you know, playgrounds are not the old swing set and sandbox and monkey bars that used to be the challenge of the county. They're age appropriate. They're developed around things like step size, handrails, size handholds, heights and structural gaps between things on the playground themselves. And our average age of our playground is about 17 years old, so we're working through those in a replacement as replacing parts as needed. In fact, we have about $10,000 investment going into some repairs at Bethel right now. But we do need to add preschool playgrounds at Bethel, one at Bethel and one at Botetourt, because neither one of those schools have those age-appropriate playgrounds. They cost about $30,000 apiece. So we were looking to ask that be included in the request of the rollover money, because that's obviously a student-centered need, along with the security, which is obviously a student and faculty-centered item. And then the third thing we were asking is we need to begin to address the lighting replacement. T12 light bulbs are no longer produced. Our majority of bulbs, including these right here, are T12s. They're the big round fluorescent bulbs. With the mercury portion of them, they're being restricted, and even the changeover to the T5s, which is a smaller bulb, is starting to receive some government challenge, let's just put it that way. So we're recommending that we begin to move toward LED initiatives to replace the lighting. There are some lighting strips where you can use the same boxes, and these gels disappear. These lens covers disappear, and they become more like the lights we have in the hallways over here, and you'll see it at Petsworth if you've been to Petsworth. The cost has gone down, the quality's gone up, the guarantees are much better. So what we're looking at to answer your earlier question about the rollover money, what we'd like to do is request the balance toward the security, the playground, 2 playgrounds, and the balance, what's remaining now, the 226, go toward lighting improvements, which is a path we have to take. We've had it on our CIP for this will be the second year.
Restroom facilities at the garage.
Oh, and that, well, right, if we spend the money, other monies toward the, if we shift the bathroom monies over, we need, if we shift the bathroom monies to take care of the security, then we need to replenish that and take care of some bathrooms that we have to be improved. They're in dire need, and I can point those out if you'd like.
Is that your recommendation?
Yes, sir.
All right, board members, you heard his recommendation.
Maybe 2 other questions, and that is, when do we need to move this forward to, as a resolution, I guess, to be able to have the money appropriated to us?
I'll let Joanne speak to that. She's done it every year for the last umpteen years.
Most of the time, we'll send it forward in November. They usually get their audit report in December, and we have done it in December as well.
Okay.
We could come back at work session.
It would be nice to see all this on a list, because frankly, I don't understand it all. So, for us to make a decision on.
I think tonight, if we could get your nod to at least go forward with the grant and the shifting enough of the bathroom funds to meet the matching for the grant.
Yes.
And then next week, on the 23rd, when you have your work session, if I can give you a little more formal proposal, and then perhaps you could vote. You could make your decision at that point in time on Peasley and Bethel, if you're not prepared to make that tonight. But we do need to go ahead and get the order and get in line on the work schedules to get these other 3 schools done within the time constraints that we have. Because it has to be, the equipment has to be here, it has to be installed and functional by, and ideally it needs to be paid for as well by March the 25th. So we don't have a lot of time.
And the contractor with whom we work has given us some really good pricing. These are these prices lower than our initial estimates. And because as he looked at the bigger project, he was able to reduce the things. He said, if I'm going to be here, and get it done. So he would like to move forward. And again, our intent was if we get that portion okayed by you folks, then the package of what we move forward to the BOS, we did think if we just presented it to you, we could email you copies of our real itemized recommendation and come back at the work session. That's okay.
That would be great.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, and this is just to echo what Mr. Record said, and I apologize if I missed this somewhere in an email, but I feel like this is the first time I'm hearing all these numbers and what we want to use this money for, and this is a pretty important issue right here, and I could feel completely unprepared to make any kind of decision on this tonight, and I'm looking back through the agenda to see if we had an action item on here that we were going to be asked to approve, what this rollover funds were going to be used for, and whether we should dip into the bathroom funds for this, and I'm kind of upset about it that we're being asked to approve this, and I had no idea this was coming, and I'm like Mr. Records, I've heard these different numbers and what we should use it for, and I'm not comfortable voting on it tonight until I see something on a piece of paper that I can wrap my head around.
Well, and let me, to make clarification, it wasn't supposed to be something that we were going to have an action item on tonight. That was, I think, Mr. Hutchinson got into explaining some of the details about some of the things that we were considering, but this wasn't going to be an action item for approval for tonight. It was going to be something that we were going to bring back at another time to have further discussion.
At the joint meeting, though, it was a part of my report that we would hold the bathroom for the match for the grant. And so I don't know, if you're not comfortable giving a nod on anything, then we'll wait until the work session, but if possible, I think we should move forward on the grant, on the 4 items, the panic alarm and the 3 schools. But that's your decision, if you want to wait until next week.
Board members, I agree with what we're saying with regards to the information that we have this evening. However, I think, as Ms. Wright indicated, the 3 schools with the security issues that are there, with the grant money that we have there, we need to take advantage of that. And if we can, I think if we could do all 5 schools at the same time, which are the last remaining schools, I think that's something that we've all discussed in the past, that the security issues are one of our top priorities, and then deal with the playground equipment and the lighting and the other costs at our work session next week. I think if we separate the 3 schools from the other 2 schools, it may put us in a different position with respect to cost associated with getting that equipment. But I'll go with the majority of the board, however the board wants to go this. I need a motion so we could continue this conversation. So if I have a motion, one way or the other, I would entertain that.
The $98,000 grant requires how much matching funds? $28,000?
It's 25%, so it's $24,000 and some
$24,000.
odd dollars.
However, that only covers the first 3 schools, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
So there would be another $80,000 that we would like to already earmark, I guess, for the other 2 schools to get all 5 at the same time.
I agree totally with what you just said. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to do all this at one time. But I have an issue with trying to make a decision on $10 without how we're spending those $10 written down on a piece of paper. So I'll make a motion that we, knowing we have gotten the grant for $98,000, that we match the additional $24,000 to move forward with that portion of the work. And then at our next meeting, we summarize very concisely how we plan to use the other monies.
Can I ask one other thing? Do we want to add that other $80,000 to earmark for the other 2 schools?
No.
Not at this time.
Okay. All right, you heard the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any other discussion? Ms. Duncan, pull the board.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Ruckers?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hook?
Yes.
Ms. Hensley?
Yes.
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Mr. Burek?
Yes. Okay. Any other items, Mr. Hutchinson?
Just the policy, but I do want to apologize. I initially came with the idea of just presenting the information regarding our thought process, and I certainly wasn't asking you to make a decision, Michael. I mean, I know you're practicing, so I certainly apologize for that. But we'll have something prior to the meeting, so you'll actually have something by email, so you'll have time to review it and spend some time. Okay. But I will say that it has been a busy couple of weeks, and literally this bid for the security equipment just came in. I received it about 2:30 today, and again, it was. We have a good contractor we work with, and he came in with the bid, and we said, go sharpen your pencil and come back, and that's what he did. And he said, I can't get it till Tuesday. And I said, bring me what you got as tight as you can. So I do appreciate what he did, and again, my apologies if it seemed otherwise. Last 2 things. First, the approval of the field trips. If we can address that, that's probably a pretty quick item. Dr. Wagner, you have anything you want to say?
Mm-hmm. We're done with that.
We're done with that?
We're done with that.
Yeah.
You pulled that as part of the...
Well, what it is, they were pulled because of the discussion that we had about the one.
Right. And we failed to act on it.
So if the board is okay with moving forward with the others, then you can still approve the other field trips that were listed. And we have further discussion about the Costa Rica trip.
Okay. That is for item, it's item H under the consent agenda that was pulled out. Do we want to approve that? It's informational, so we still have to approve it.
It's under consent agenda, and you voted on the consent agenda.
Yeah, but we pulled it out of the consent agenda. Item H and item F5 was pulled from the consent agenda. So we have to approve this one minus the international trip that we discussed earlier. So can I have a motion on that particular one? A motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right.
Thank you.
All right, my last item.
Hold on, can we go back? Because I hit my button to give
Oh, I'm
the
sorry, I
conversation
didn't see you.
discussion, but I think it would be helpful in the future for I thought the spreadsheet was great for the field trips. It gave a cost to the student column, but I would also think we would benefit from a cost to the school division column as well, just because I expect that over time, we're really going to have to start considering these. There were a lot of them on there. None of them stood out to me as bad ideas, but I think over time, that's something that we owe anybody who's interested in our processes to look at to see. And I expect most of them, the cost of the school system seem to be pretty small because of the minimal amount of buses offset by the cost of the student. But personally, I'd like to see a cost to the school system column as well.
Good point, Mr. Anderson. Thank you. All right. Mr. Hutchinson, I think you said you have one more item?
Yes, sir. Policy GBJ that you pulled from the consent agenda. There's been some, I did not receive any email comments, but of course you heard Mr. McGovern's comments, and so looking for your approval and or editing as need be.
Okay. Is this the second reading?
Yes, sir. And if you recall, Mr. Anderson asked for some changes to be made, and those are actually the underlined in the first paragraph. The underlined portion is is a change in wording, and then the part that's stricken from that first paragraph, they're under exempt employees. Now, I did add a definition for exempt employee and non-exempt employees that give somewhat of a guidelines. Those are not complete definitions, and if you'd like, I could pull those out also, since they are not complete. They're just a summation of the basic definition that's provided by the Fair Labor Standards Act. There's more details that accompany that.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Anderson?
I just had one question that was similar to Mr. McGovern's, which is that sentence at the end of the second paragraph about administrative meetings, curriculum development, et cetera. That doesn't just apply to elementary school teachers. That applies to all exempt employees. The way it's added to the end of that paragraph makes it seem like it's focused on just elementary teachers, when I don't think that's our intent.
Would you like it separated into standalone paragraphs, so you would have the first paragraph, the second paragraph beginning with elementary school teachers, and the third paragraph administrative meetings?
Yeah, I think that would solve the problem.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments from board members on this particular policy? All right, do I have a motion? As Mr. Anderson, would you like to make a motion and make
Sure.
it in such a way that it as amended so that we could get that corrected as part of this?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we accept file number GBJ as amended per the previous discussion to separate the second paragraph into an additional third paragraph describing the additional items that require hours beyond the stated minimum.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Nothing else, Mr. Hutchinson?
Nothing. Thank you, sir, for your time.
All right.
I appreciate it.
The next item is budget and finance items. Ms. Wright.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I believe Ms. Parker had one more administrative.
I'm sorry. All right, 1 second. Ms. Parker?
As I was reading through the environmental health and safety issues, and I'm glad to know that we've been doing our lockdown drills and all of that, but I picked up on something that concerns me, and it's been concerning me for quite a while with all the discussions on television about concussions and our issues with our, the way I understand it, with some of these were football related. I'm sure there are other sports as well. Mm-hmm. But there were questions about our helmets and such as that earlier in the season. So could you just give me a rundown, or Ms. Church, she was here. I don't think she's here now.
I can give you some overview because I've had these conversations with Ms. Church just recently.
Okay.
And helmets are not the end all to stopping this problem. And helmet-to-helmet contact is obviously a serious thing. We have had, unfortunately, 14 concussions in football. And it is an anomaly. There's no reason.
There must be a reason. People hitting each other in the head is reason. It's the
That's a
nature
good point.
of the sport.
That's correct.
It's not an anomaly.
Well, the number is an anomaly. It's really, and it's not.
In football.
That is true. And then,
If you have a football program, then you are tacitly saying that you are allowing these concussions to happen to students. I just have to pressure on that.
you're right. You're correct. It does not occur in band. Yes, ma'am. And I was relating back to our earlier conversation. But seriously,
What you just said, though.
I'm sorry.
How many do we usually have in a football? So you said 14 is higher than?
Absolutely higher. I mean, if you look around the area, and again, as Ms. Hensley said, if you have football, you are going to you have a greater potential for concussions. And so numbers around half dozen or less are usually what a football team will experience. So it's not like our coaches are saying, go out and bang your heads together. It just, in fact, the coaches are shaking their heads, so we do not understand it. We do not know why. We are preaching safety and moving forward with safety.
Mr. Hutchinson, is it just that it's not necessarily an increase over time when compared to last several seasons, but we're just doing a better job finding them? And the medical attention towards them and the emphasis on them at this particular time is much more than what they were, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. So I think we're just doing a better job in recognizing them when they happen, better than we did in the past. That's what my assumption would be.
I would say you're absolutely right, Mr. Burek. That certainly attributes to it, that we are looking for them. Again, it's an ongoing education project. Every time we have a concussion, there's a complete evaluation of questions that are asked from the coaches to the trainer, to the child, to the parents. What did you say? What did you report? What did you see? What did you hear? I mean, talk about everybody at the situation. And just, again, it is becoming more aware, as you say.
I think my concern is not only that we're having them, but I am a football fan, as you all know. All sports, pretty much. I have boys, so they played them all. You can get hit with a baseball bat just as easy in the head as you can with a helmet-to-helmet. I think my concern is whether or not our students are being told, taught, practiced that they are not supposed to be doing the helmet-to-helmet, that they're showing proper technique in hits and that kind of thing. So that's my concern, is I think we need to look into that and make sure that they're being told the right way to present themselves when they're in that situation.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's part of conversation that goes on. Not just helmet to helmet. Kids upended, landed on their head. That type of thing also can result in this. Unfortunately, it's like having airbags in a car. It doesn't mean you're not going to have accidents, and so those things do happen.
Anything? Okay.
We have one more for Mr. Hutchinson. I think it's pretty adequately captured in the written report, but just for the benefit of people who may be listening, the technology issues at the high school, there was an email from Dr. Clemens that said we'd get more of an update on that. And again, I see it in there, but if you could just give us the highlights of what the issues are and how it's being remedied, or punt to Mr. Brogan.
Can I ask Mr. Brogan to speak to that? And that way, if you have specific questions, he can do that. I'd you rather hear him?
The problems we've been having at the high school are also happening at all the other schools. We're having sporadic disconnects on the internet. We attributed it to an upgrade to Windows 7 with IE 11. steps to fix it. We've identified and we're updating the settings on all of the lab computers. I'm in contact with Verizon to increase our bandwidth about sixfold. And we're just going through and identifying as each problem occurs and trying to fix it. We have not had any reports this week. If they're happening, they're not being reported. And I'm not saying they're not happening. I'm just saying they're not being reported. But we've been monitoring it on a daily basis. And the biggest issue with the Windows 7 update, we were downloading about 50 gigabytes in the morning between 7 and 9:30, which puts a big load on the entire internet for that period, which was why people were being knocked out. As I said, we're working on it, and I don't know if it's happening right now. Maybe still somewhat, but it depends. Did I answer your question? Thank you.
I have a quick.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question for you too.
Okay.
You mentioned we've increased our bandwidth sixfold.
That's my
from what
goal.
we previously had. So we've done that, or we're going to do
No, I'm in the consultation with Bill Lindsay and Verizon, and it actually will net us about $1,000 a month savings.
and have 6 times bandwidth?
Pardon?
And have
That's
6 times the bandwidth.
Yes.
Which then will allow more devices to access our system, ultimately as well, I would imagine.
I don't think you'll have more devices accessing our system. It's just that each slice of the pie will be larger for
Right.
each person who's on our network at any given moment.
So does this take into account the 400 or 500 iPads, the iPad program? I mean, are they all on? Are they on the
Oh,
system?
they haven't been
they're
on yet at all.
They haven't been on. Will that apply a load that variable needs to be taken into account?
The iPad initiative will focus on A-Hall. We've already made the adjustments in A-Hall with the wireless access. We're now looking to expand the wireless access in C-Hall and D-Hall. And we're also identifying shortfalls at Peasley, Botetourt, and several other schools just because of building construction requires us to add more access points. The long-term position from the vendors is we need to put an access point in every classroom. But it's gonna
Wireless
take
access,
years.
a wireless access point in each classroom?
Yes.
So, wow.
It's going to cost money, and it's going to be a multi-year process.
Can't do one big wireless access point?
No. It becomes a function of number of connections per device. An example, and it's a bad example, last spring when we tried to do the writing portion at Peasley, one access point was pushing out a smidge more power than the other 8 access points in the trailers. 200 computers logged onto the single access point at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And the net result was it was working at less than a snail's pace.
Thank you.
And that's my question. So if we get the sixfold, when Dr. Wagner's talking about starting to do the alternate SOL assessments online, I know, and you just mentioned I was at Botetourt for universal testing, and everything crashed. Suddenly, the teachers were frantically trying to get pencils and papers and copies of tests. So how...
That was your universal screening. That's completely separate from what the SOL tests are, and those are usually done on a wired network.
The SOLs are done on a wired network?
They all are right now.
So if we move to all of the SOLs going online, we don't need access points in the classrooms?
If you're going to use wireless devices, you need access points.
And when you talk about needing money, how much ballpark? What does
$600 an access point.
Okay, thank you.
It's about 600 times 400.
And I just also want to say, I did appreciate your email, and I know that you and your staff are doing yeoman's work. I mean, we have a small number of people devoted to, I know I knew the number last year because I saw it in my presentation, but I can't remember how many computers and iPads and everything. I mean, you do an amazing job keeping everything going. And so it's not in any way a criticism of you or your staff.
We're not taking it as such.
Good, because you're doing everything that you possibly can, and I appreciate it.
Mr. Brogan, one quick question. You mentioned that a lot of the data loads are happening between 7:30 and 9:30 in the morning, which really puts a load on the system. Is that because that's when a lot of the staff comes in at that particular time and starts doing work, or is that doing patches and downloads and stuff like that? And if it is the latter, is there something that can be done on a nightly run?
The non-technical answer was there's a Windows update feature that it goes out and grabs the updates that a computer needs. The computers, when they were set up over the summer, some of them did not have that feature turned off, which is what a normal practice is. Further, we have another piece of software which locks down all the computers so that students and teachers in labs cannot add programs when they feel like it, which was a problem several years ago. Because of that lockdown program, it was going every day updating Windows.
I gotcha.
Instead of just doing it once, it was doing it every day.
Oh, so there was just a glitch there.
And the
that
techs,
you
I
found.
believe, have addressed every lab computer so far.
Good.
And as I said, I'm not hearing it in the last couple of days.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Wright, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. And good evening, everyone. Before I get started, I will comment on Mr. Anderson's field trip question for the future. The Transportation Department actually bills the schools for the driver and the fuel for the field trips. So I believe the student cost probably reflects the total cost. But we can check into that and get back with you.
I would say no, because many of them had no cost to the students, but
Okay.
did require a bus and a driver.
Okay. Thank you. All right, the first item that I have for tonight, I know everyone's tired, so I will try to be very brief. Budget and finance, as always, is very busy. There are very few points through the year where we have any breathing room at all. But since the last board meeting, just to give you a few of the highlights of the things that we have completed, universal availability certification for annuities has been completed and submitted to our third-party administrator. We have conducted HIPAA training. HIPAA stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Any employee who may come in contact with protected health information must receive an annual training on protection of that information and what is expected and required. And so we developed a test, we document scoring and make sure that those identified individuals complete the test. We also have to obtain health insurance waivers, which provides a notification of rights to any employee who's eligible for health insurance and does not enroll in the health insurance. And so we spend quite a bit of time tracking down those individuals and explaining to them why it's important that they sign and are made aware of their rights. And so we have completed that for the current year. We've also been continuing orientations. 14 additional employees have been oriented in the payroll area. On the budget side of the house, we completed field work with the auditors. We have submitted the FY14 annual school report for the school division. Last month, the report that was referenced was the regional special ed program. We've also completed, and we will be discussed in a little more detail, the annual financial report, which is a one-page report that is prepared after the annual school report. It comes to the school board and is also sent to the Board of Supervisors. This report is already on our website, and it's already set in my email to go to Mrs. Garton and the Board of Supervisors in the morning. We have finalized our fixed assets for FY14. This is tracking, our capitalization limit is $5,000, so we track all assets valued at $5,000 or more within fixed assets, and this is a part of the county's CAFA report. Those items are also depreciated. We're all claiming a little bit of kudos for the State Security Equipment Grant. Mrs. Church and Heather Lucas in my department actually prepared and submitted that grant, so we're very proud of receiving that. Training that has been received by different members of the department is the Affordable Care Act webinar. The Virginia Association of School Business Officials, the accounting manager and myself attended. The Employee Services and myself attended a workers' comp and a family medical leave conference. Employee Services has oriented 17 guest teachers to the sub-finder system as well. On the second page of the report, we have the tracking data for family medical leave, workers' comp, and sub-finder. And of course, these counts were almost non-existent during the summer. Most of our employees are at home, but you will see the increases since the last month. Family medical leave, we have 11 increases. Workers' comp, we have 16. And the failed to fill, of course, we have 3 of those where we had none last month. Some of the things that we're looking forward to in the future that was on the report, actually some of them we've already completed now, so they'll be on the completed side. We're working on the tracking for the Affordable Care Act. This is of great concern, and it's going to take quite a bit of resources and time from staff. We are preparing the calculations for the fall bonus. As you will recall, this is for paraprofessionals, bus drivers, bus assistants, custodians, security personnel, cafeteria managers, and cafeteria workers. And I'd like to reiterate the criteria that was put in place was that those individuals would work at least, would have been in one of these approved positions last year for at least a semester and a day. They are currently continuing in an approved position and in good standing with the organization. So that will pay out in the November payroll, and it's 3% of the gross pay. We are also working, we have quite a bit of new responsibilities with the VRS and the disability, and we're working with our system, and we're having to establish some types of tracking outside of the system that cannot be handled appropriately by a current payroll product. We are establishing, we've already set up and are tweaking the compensation projection sheets and the budget sheets with the compensation with current staff built into them. One of our staff members had attended Medicaid training. Since this report was prepared, we have completed, in conjunction with Ann Lannon, the annual transportation report for the DOE. We today just closed out a couple of our special education grants, and tomorrow we begin site visits at our schools. And over this week and next week, of the 8 schools, we have 5 site visits scheduled of the 8, and then the other 3 will be shortly thereafter. Those are the highlights. The United Way campaign, of course, is coming up during this month, I believe, as well. The second item that I have for you is the donations, which is, I believe, is one of everyone's favorite. And so since the last board meeting, I'd like to read for you the donations that have been received. Bethel Elementary School received from Target $148.25 from the Take Charge of Education program. They also, from the Prevent Blindness, received a $150 school health gift card through the SIP for Sight contest. Body Tot Lego team received the following contributions: $200 from CSL DBA Portrait Works, $200 from Franktronics, and $100 from Mainsail Wealth Advisors. Their robotics team received $100 from PHA Incorporated and $50 from State Farm Insurance. Body Tot also received $2,000 for the Student Assistance Fund from Mrs. Mary Burton Gleason. Gloucester High School received $500 from Corbin Corporation for the printing of the school newspaper, and $10 from Mr. and Mrs. Warren Zuger to the NJROTC. Page Middle School received $100 for the backpack program from Craig and Leela Doolittle. The Peasley Middle School received from the Prevent Blindness organization a $200 school health gift card for the SIP for Sight contest as well. Bethel and Peasley both applied and received those funds. NASA contributed to the school board office 549 furniture items to be used as needed, and Mrs. Mary Swayhart contributed 2 plants to the school board office. Total dollars received, $3,408.25, and then the additional items that were also referenced. So I would ask that you join me in accepting these donations with grateful appreciation.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Board members, you heard the recommendation. Do I have a motion? Motion, a second? A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan, will you pull the board?
Ms. Parker?
Yes.
Ms. Hensley?
Yes.
Mrs. Hook?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Records?
Yes.
Mr. Burek?
Yes. You're still on,
Okay.
Ms. Wright.
The final item is a combination of 4 financial reports. The first report that's included is the year-end report, and this is brought back to you again from last month. And the reason that we returned, I did tell you that I had found an item on food service that I thought would be a correction that would change them from a negative year to a positive, and that was in fact the case. And so instead of a loss of $1,039, they actually made a profit of $1,404. Also, school construction, as a part of the audit, the auditors require that we expense retainage. And with most construction projects, whenever a monthly draw is submitted, 5% retainage is set aside. And generally, that's not paid until the end of the job. When you get to the end of the job, sometimes you'll release a portion of the retainage, but you hold back some of those funds until you're satisfied that the job is completed appropriately. But the auditors did require that the amount that was on the books for Oyster Point on June the 30th be expensed, and also included on the balance sheet side as an accounts payable. So on June 30th, $299,866.10 retainage was expensed, and so that has been added to the expenses for the school construction. Are there any questions on the operating and construction food service before we move on to the next report? Okay.
I have one question.
Sure.
And it's just, I think, because it's the first time I've seen the year-end or fiscal year-end, and that is, I'm not sure what page this is, 86 or so. It's the revenue report, and it shows the $254,000 local carryover, if you will. And then it shows, at least that's what it appears to be. And then the federal funds were $284,000 less than what we expected in the budget. So what made that occur, and what made that occur? That's the first question.
One of the main items there is we have $150,000 miscellaneous grants that's in there every year. And most of the grants that we put that in there so you don't have to go back and reappropriate every dollar that you receive. And so there was, I don't know, I don't have the detail with me, so I can't say, but there was a very small amount expended there, and several, that's the largest part of it. And then some of the federal dollars came in less. I can give you detail on the federal, but I'm sorry, I don't have.
No, sure. I
didn't
to put you on the spot there like that. And then the state funds, just so I understand, like we were within $9,500 of what we budgeted last year versus what the state physically actually gave us. Not knowing exactly what those numbers were on March 15th and September 30th and all these variables that go into how much money the state gives us. But that seemed pretty darn close to what we had expected we'd get, which is good, which is very different than what we're expecting this year.
For all of the operating revenue, I can email you a report
It would be
tomorrow
interesting to see it,
that
if you
would
would.
show line by line for
Sure.
each one of those areas. I'd be happy to do
you
that.
would.
And,
Thank you.
Since you asked, you pointed out the county contribution amount, the $254,190, we had some contracts that were not completed at the end of the year that were appropriated. So some of that money has already been reappropriated to us. So the balance that's left, that that we will have a proposal for you next week to go forward to the Board of Supervisors. After you take off the 2 contracts that were reappropriated, it's $228,646.
Great.
So that was the amount on June 30th, but they already reappropriated 2 amounts
Okay.
from that.
Thank you.
Okay? You're welcome. The next report is the one-page annual financial report that we're required to complete after the annual school report is completed. And just to try to highlight some things that if you look at it in greater detail, you may have a question on, if you try to match up our year-end report to this. About a third of the way down, when it has fiscal year-end balances at the close of the year, the school operating fund there is showing $283,211.53. And so you would probably ask, why is it not 254? I have a footnote on that line for you. We have a balance for the year-round school planning grant. It's just the way that the annual report is required to be reported. We received the full grant during FY14. The state allows us to carry that over. So that $29,021.28 has to show in the balance on the state report, but again, the county has already appropriated that to us because we accrued that balance through the county over to next year. So that's the difference between that line. And then, let's see. And we also accounted for the $299,000 with the school construction as well. So these, the balance is not going to match on the school construction with this because the amount on the year-end financial report is just that year's budget, and the state report is going to be the exact revenue against the expenditures. So that's going to be the difference in that. And as I said, this report, you're receiving this tonight, and it's posted on the web, was in your agenda. The Board of Supervisors and Mrs. Garton will receive that tomorrow by email. The third report that's in your package is just an update of the school construction. I made the adjustments that were suggested by Mr. Records last month, and I also, as I advised you, I would move the revenue to the top of the report to make it more consistent with our other financial reports. This report also, I have the footnote that we're showing the retainage as well. We will only post the retainage on June 30th, so we won't be doing that every month. We'll do it at the end of the year, whatever the additional retainage is. I believe since the last report, the Abington arbitrage funds are one of the, I think I told you last month that we had received approval, but those funds are now in-house, and that was $79,343.25. So are there any questions on the construction financial?
Any questions from Ms. Wright? No?
Okay. And last but not least, the HVAC report. So we will be including each month the construction and the HVAC to give you updates so you will know exactly where those two funds stand. The main thing that was added on the HVAC was just a small bill for Huffman and Huffman for Petsworth, which was $1,999. So just under 1.8 million balance, and the next big decision will be when the Achilles project goes out to bid and we see what the balance is on that. So, are there any questions?
Questions for Ms. Wright on any of the reports that she presented? Seeing none, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it very much. Next item is school board member items, VSBA annual convention, November 19th through the 21st in Williamsburg. Ms. Kamash has registered all those members that will be attending. Any other matters by board members at this time? Any board members have any items? Seeing none, I'll go on to public announcements. Gloucester High School homecoming parade and football game is this Friday the 17th, beginning at 4:45 for the parade and then 7 p.m. For the football game at Gloucester High School. Gloucester County Public Schools United Way Education Foundation campaign begins Monday, the 20th of October through the 31st of October. Ms. Wright mentioned that earlier. Gloucester County Public Schools Public Pupil Transportation Appreciation Day is Wednesday, October 22nd. The next Gloucester County Public School Comprehensive Plan meeting will be Wednesday, October 22nd as well, at 7 p.m. In the cafeteria at this location. The next special meeting, our work session, will be Thursday, October 23rd, right here in the auditorium. The last day of the first quarter is Friday, October 31st. Professional Day and students will be off on Monday, November 3rd. Another professional day, as well as Diversity Election Day, and students will be off, is Tuesday, November the 4th. First day of the second quarter begins Wednesday, November the 5th, and our next meeting will be November the 11th here at this location, beginning at 7 p.m. With that said, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Motion, do I have a second? And a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.